Good evening. Welcome to the study session of August 8th, 2023. Donna, will you do a roll call, please?
I will. Councilmember Bode,
Here.
Councilmember Sherman. Here. Councilmember Gutierrez.
Here.
Mayor Nesco,
Here.
Deputy Mayor via Zoom.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councilmember McDowell
Present.
and Councilmember Peterson.
Here.
Thank you, Donna.
You're welcome.
Tonight, Public Works Director Jay Harris, along with staff from FCS group, has information for us about water and sewer rate studies.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council, Jay Harris, your Public Works Director. So, water and sewer rates. So we have the rates that run out this year in 2023. And we're looking at adopting the rates probably for 2024, 2025, maybe 2026, probably maybe a 4-year period. We can decide that later on the exact length of the rates. And so the drivers of the rate primarily are the capital improvement projects, which I met with you at the last study session and we went over the list of things. Those come from the comprehensive plans, a lot of them. A lot of the day-to-day maintenance projects are in there, but the actual bigger projects are in the comprehensive plan. And you guys, on the 15th, I will be bringing you both the water and sewer comprehensive plans to look at for adoption. And I don't know, they're about that thick. So I'm going to have a quiz in the middle of those and I'll pick a page to see if you guys read it. Okay. So anyways, we got that going on. So we have the capital improvement projects, and then another driver is just debt financing. We have some debt, more on wastewater than we do on water. And then another driver of rates is just our operations and maintenance, our people and our yearly budgets, to keep the water and sewer systems running. So I got to you the capital improvement side of it and our maintenance side of it. Brent Armstrong here is going to talk more about on our operations and maintenance. How many people we have, generally, what do they do, right? I think it's just a good, 5 minutes, 10 minutes max to sort of go over what we do in the sewer and water systems, how many people we have. And then after that, we'll queue up FCS group that has their actual first presentation about their rate study. So Brent.
Yeah, we will start off with the sewer position, give you a handout. And it's kind of an overview on current staffing levels. So we can turn to page 3. This is the positions that we have that are funded and throughout the sewer and collection side. We have 11.7 employees. Currently, we have an unfilled position. We're working for budget and we'll figure out how we're filling that.
Brent, how many operator 2s and 3s you have? These are people with significant training. They're not a dime a dozen. They're a little hard to find when they leave. He's been doing a good job bringing the people up at the plants, but I know you're an operator 3 or you're 4. You're 4.
So counting myself, we have, and we're listed here, the wastewater treatment plant supervisor. Chris Nord is a 3. We have Lucas Moody, who's our lab supervisor. He's a 3. Bart Hill is a 3, and Yasmin is a 3. And we have Eric Ossett and Donnie Walker. They're working through the technician program. Eric is got his certification 1, and Donnie is working on that. And then most of the other positions are in our collection side. So they're in conveyance.
So that's the piping systems in the roadways, storm drainage is part of it, and then sewer manholes, laterals, all of that. One other question I had, so on the actual plants themselves, do both the plants require a level 4 or
Right now our certifications, the main wastewater treatment plant is a level 2, and the satellite water reclamation plant is a level 3. And that's just because we did a different type of processes for the water even before we started that.
Okay, thank you.
turn to page 4, which is just some. A little bit of information about our system. The amount of sewer main line, force main, number of manholes. The amount of sewer connections. And then this is. Really, the expensive part is all the pumps and blowers, the heavy equipment that. Run the treatment plants and convey the sewage to it. We average about 2.3 million throughout the year. Summertime flows tend to get down towards $1 million. But with INI in the rainy season, it jumps up and it can be 4 million. So the average is right at near about 2.3. And that's for the main wastewater treatment plant. The satellite plant is actually averaging about 2.2 MGB. Or 20,000 gallons a day.
And so, Brandon, you've done a lot of INI projects. Your system health, is it aging? Is it getting better? I mean, what do you think the average system, that's piping system?
Yeah,
Average age?
so the downtown area is. Pretty much all we have recent Capitol Hill and Basin 5 up on Hillcrest. There's still a small section called Basin 4 on East Hillcrest that needs to be updated, and then. The Angleside area and Tom Creek area, it's really cool. I think that that's where we'll be targeting with the nuclear burning, things like that, to target some of those areas and smoke that thing. So, but yeah, and it's kind of funny because I've been here since the beginning of it all, and they're saying these plants are new, it's like they're 12 years, both of them are 10 plus years old. They're not new plants anymore, parts are wearing, so we're having to replace things and do more maintenance. Page 5 is a list of wastewater sites. We have the main wastewater treatment plant, the water reclamation plant, we have 5 pump stations. Bonnie Glen, Capitol Hill, and Cascade are smaller pump stations, and then the 2 big pump stations, Front Street and Neelan Park. As well as the spray field that we have to maintain, the biosolids building. We just purchased the future site for the North Shelton Diversion Lift Station, so we maintain the grounds up there. And then we have the main connections for the state control and the Washington directions. And I'm not going to necessarily go through all these duties, but I just wanted to kind of give them as a reference on what our staffing is completing. And this will actually become a lot clearer too, and get more specific once the EAM system is up. We'll have the work order back to really get you an idea of what we're getting done. Yes, so daily site checks, as well as maintenance, lab testing daily. And we are staffed 7 days a week, and we do have an on-call person for wastewater at this point. But yeah, just these are some of the job duties, and then some of the monthly job duties are on the next page with both the permits, equipment calibrations, valve exercising, and the QA/QC is a lab testing to keep our accreditation.
Brent, I have a question just a little bit back.
Sure.
So your site checks, what, for instance, tell me what you do at the lift station.
So we just go to all of our lift stations, make sure that pumps are in good order, nothing's been vandalized.
You
the
do that
grounds
every
are
day?
maintained, yes. And
Okay,
because we do have a SCADA system, but we like to go there and see if somebody's trying to tamper with the facility, get in there. We do have a lot of garbage removal down on Front Street. And just make sure that what we're seeing on the screen is actually what's going on.
okay, all right.
For yearly, most of these duties have to do with permits. We have to report all of our We do the creek samples, that's kind of tied in to stormwater, but we run those samples through the plant too. Biosolids reporting, waste load assessment is just characteristics of waste coming in. The INI and the tracks how much that rain flow affects the plant's flows. And then lab accreditation.
So Brent, what happens if you didn't run your lab?
Then we would have to farm out every sample for our permit compliance
Okay,
and send those out and pay for someone else to do them, and you don't get real time results for your process.
what that
So we
is
make a
when
lot of
things,
adjustments off the,
correct, when things are going wrong, they're doing lab testing to find out why they're going wrong. And I got into that a long time ago, that we went to contract lab testing and it didn't work out well, because depending on the testing, it take a day or two to get back. Well, you need to be fine tuning processes on the fly to keep in permit compliance.
and there are a few for the nutrient permit that we send out, the water management, obviously, and it can vary from a week to 3 weeks on results.
So is that you testing the water also in the tanks, in the
Oh,
water
yeah,
towers?
testing our waste stream as well as the influent and
So the E. coli that was years ago in one of the water tanks, that was,
Yeah, that's part of this one here, they're just going over next,
Yeah,
that's the water
okay.
system.
all right,
And we do some testing for our water.
how often do you have to do that?
Cross connection brings it in like 2 weeks or every other week.
Okay.
So, any questions on the sewer? This is the same sort of layout for our water department. There are budgeted positions and the unfilled position is a half time we just need everything up with the waters. That's why I say the other half of the year is with FTE. The certification levels, I'm not quite sure what they hit on. I think it's a bit too. That you have that Mike, Matt, and Brady have, they may have their threes. And then
That's water distribution.
and Roger. So,
Yeah.
they're all for them, but I'm not quite sure who's at what for the fire department. And then we have the operators that doing the field installs for, right now we have the AMI project and along with the reading monthly and all the maintenance on the water system.
Does the fire department have anything to do with the fire hydrants? Checking them? Or is that
No,
new?
we didn't get the fire departments. And do the budget.
All right.
This is a little bit about the. Page 4 is a little bit about the system, 70 miles of water main, 956 valves, 608 fire hydrants. 470 or 4,754 services. 659 backflow. Average daily usage. 2 million.
Would you be willing to explain backflow? Because I know a lot of people don't understand what that is.
So backflow protection is basically a safety mechanism to keep the city's water system safe from residential and commercial industrial users. Prevents their water, so if they had a line break or some contaminant got into their site, they couldn't come in to the main water system. It stops that from happening.
Because we have a gas furnace, so every year we have to get our backflow checked.
Yeah, and there's a whole list of things that could kick in, what requires a backflow, it could be irrigation, it could be sewer pump. It could be a soda dispenser, anything that has the possibility to contaminate and cross connect our system.
Okay.
Page 5 has a list of the water department's tanks, booster pumps, well sites, PRV stations. And also the water department owns our shop facility down on Pine Street, so they do the budget for maintenance of that facility.
So the age of the water system is quite a bit older than the sewer system. The tanks, we just had the inspections done. Did you email those out?
I haven't got it yet.
Yeah, okay. You'll see those, they're actually pretty good news. You know, there's tanks at 1960s, 1970s, for the majority of them. And, you know, there's a few of them that need some work, but you know, they're faring okay. Got a lot of cast iron water lines, which is older. We use ductile iron now. So those are lines that were put in the 50s to, you know, later 60s, 70s. So a lot of our hydrants are older. And so when you go to the comprehensive plans, they had significant projects for valve replacements, because you got to shut off sections of the system. Well, if the valves are from the 50s and the 60s, they don't seat well. And so you're shutting off blocks and blocks, you keep going farther and farther out. So anyways, the water utility has quite a bit older assets. The sewer, because of the I&I projects, a lot of those assets have been replaced.
As well as
So
for these, like,
this is Pine Street, does that include houses and whatever, or just
our shop.
just a shop? Okay. Anybody see anything different in their water around that area? Since the pipes are getting kind of old?
No, there isn't much. What it is cast iron pipes just get more brittle with age. And when we have a break, it's typically during colder weather, or really hot weather. And we're seeing more and more cast iron pipe breaks. And that's where the valves are important first, so you can shut off that section and get a repair on it. And then where you have multiple repairs, it means that you need to replace that line sooner than later. A lot of the services have been upgraded to copper or PEX. And so that side of the business is doing pretty good. And we're working on the meter side of it right now.
Can you tell me what PRV stands for?
Yeah, that's a pressure reducing
Pressure
vault.
reducing.
And that takes the pressure from a higher elevation zone and drops it down to a lower elevation zone. So it allows us to connect our tanks together that are at different heights.
And then again, a list of duties. State mandated chlorine samples, water site inspections. Locates, meter reads, meter reading usually about the first 13 days of the month. And hopefully that improves with our AMI being able to free up employees with that. Site maintenance, the water probably is the biggest landowner in the city. So there's a lot of maintenance, of mowing and keeping it nice. Backflows a lot. I mean, we have 2 specific jobs to keep up on all the backflow monitoring. And water quality. Monthly duties or reports to the state, chlorine, we do the vaccine samples. Another cross check that we do, backflow protection testing, meter reading, door hangers, law costs. So the water department can get quite busy when you have maintenance projects going and the door hangers and ons and offs go on. So
When you test the chlorine or the level in the water, where do you, is there something at the bottom of the water tank that?
we have them at the well sites, and then we have a few distant sites throughout the city that I don't know specifically where they are. We have certain.
Okay.
And then the yearly reporting, that goes to the state cross connection survey, water use efficiency. And consumption confidence report. And a lot of these reports are making sure the water is safe, and then also making sure that you're not wasting water. Right? And hopefully with this AMI project, we get a real read. We have leak detection that we get reports on, and so we've actually improved our system in that over the past 10 years, lowering those levels through managing levels that you have to be under. And then operation maintenance. These can be daily tasks to yearly tasks that just going through, and it's operation and maintenance and almost preventive maintenance at the same time. Go through and cycle these valves, do leak detection, tank cleaning, try and do the flushing, keeping our water, even though, so it's not stagnant in those lines.
Is that what they're doing when I see the bleeding water down there by the pizza place downtown? Sometimes they got water.
Yeah, it could be, it's usually they're hooked up to a fire hydrant with a dispersion thing, and you'll see it, but when they're gonna be in that area, they'll do a hanger in the area. You can see some stirred up water. It's not anything that's contaminated, but it could get murky because it's just stirring stuff up.
So any questions about operations and maintenance for sewer water? No?
Well, I'm really impressed with the amount of things you do every day and monthly and yearly and whatever.
Yeah,
A lot of,
it's a large thing of wind.
yeah.
So next we have the great presentation from FCS Group. They're here, there's Tavi right there. Good evening.
Hello.
So can you hear us okay?
Yeah, coming through loud and clear. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Alrighty. I can share my screen and get going on the rate study update presentation. Is that coming through okay?
Yes.
All right. Tonight we will be talking about two different topics. The first will be the revenue requirement. And really when we use that term, all we're saying is, what does it cost to fund the water utility and the sewer utility? And as mentioned earlier tonight, that's operating costs, that's your capital costs, debt service on existing loans or bonds, and how does that compare with current rate revenues? And if there's a forecasted gap in expenses and revenues, what increases might be needed to close that gap over time? And so we look at a multi-year period, and then we come back with a comparative monthly rate survey to see where the city's rates are today, where they would be next year with the proposed rate adjustments. And the second item we talk about tonight is the general facilities charges. So these are different than the monthly rates that all customers pay. These are specifically for development as it occurs, as they connect to the water and sewer utilities. It's a one-time charge that goes towards offsetting the capital costs of each utility. And we don't have final results, but we have preliminary numbers, and we can share with you how they compare with your current GFCs, and also how they compare with other regional and other jurisdictions across the state in terms of the total water and sewer GFC through a comparative survey. So the general framework for the rate study, we take into account different policy items. On the left there, you can see fiscal policies. These are things like operating reserves, capital reserves, certain requirements related to debt service. It can be a balance of what's appropriate in terms of rate or cash funding versus debt funding. And then, of course, GFCs is an important part of that capital funding strategy. And those all impact the revenue requirement, which you see there on the right in those green boxes. So when you add it all together, the total revenue requirement takes into account making sure you're funding your fiscal policies, covering your operating and maintenance costs, and then those two bottom ones, capital expenditures and debt service. Now those are related in terms of cash, so rate revenue each year, as well as making sure you have enough money if you need to borrow to pay for future debt principal and interest. In order to pay for the water and sewer utility costs, there are monthly rates. So what you see here on the screen, these are specific to single family. And so for the water utility, you can see there's a monthly base charge there, $16.46 per month for that smallest meter size. And then depending on how much water usage a typical customer might use, there's incremental blocks. So the first 600 cubic feet are charged a lower rate than the next 900 cubic feet, and so on and so forth. And then there is that city utility tax that goes on top of these charges. In the sewer utility, there's a monthly base charge of about $54. And then based on per cubic foot of water used in a given billing period, there is a charge for that as well. So it gives you a sense of how a typical bill is put together. Over the last 3 years, we looked at what the actual inflation has been. These are June over June inflation numbers for the last 3 years. So you can see, for example, back in 2021, inflation was about 5%. The water rates increased by about 10%, and sewer rates just under 5%. Whereas in 2022, inflation was just over 10%. You can see water and sewer rates were well below 5% there. So altogether, over the last 3 years, you can see that rate adjustments for the water and sewer utility have not quite kept pace with inflation. So putting it all together, how much revenue is needed? It's funding your reserves, fiscal policies, it's covering your operating and maintenance costs, and then it's funding your new capital projects, whether with rates or making sure you're covering existing and new debt service if needed. The next slide will talk about fiscal policies and kind of what they are for each of the city's utilities. One of these is the operating reserve, just making sure you have enough in your account to accommodate the ups and downs of day-to-day operations. You got revenue coming in at different times than you're paying your employees, paying for supplies and materials. So making sure you have enough in your bank account to cover those ebbs and flows. And consistent with citywide policy, both utilities have a reserve equal to about 20% of annual operating expenses. Separate and above that, we're recommending a capital reserve to handle any emergency repairs that might come up throughout the year. Could be capital cost overruns for planned capital projects, or if there's a local match requirement for some types of grants, you could tap into that reserve as well. And so for the water utility, we're recommending about 2% of your original cost of assets. Sewer utility is a little bit newer in terms of some of the facilities, so not quite recommending as high of a level, but still at that 1% of original cost of assets. And then lastly, debt service coverage. When we put together the revenue requirement for each utility, we're making sure that each utility can cover its debt service obligations, plus a little bit of a buffer, so that after you pay for your operating expenses and debt service, there should be a little bit left over. Gives those who give you money in terms of debt issuers a little bit more confidence that you'll be able to make your debt payments on time, even if there are some unanticipated changes in revenues or expenses. So we'll jump into the water utility first, and then we'll cover the sewer utility. Wanted to spend some time focusing on the capital program that feeds directly into the water utility revenue requirement. In total, the 2023 through 2029 capital program is about $15 million. Those are in today's dollars. With inflation, we'd expect that to be closer to 17 million. So on average, about $2.5 million escalated to the year of construction. And there's a couple of key storage projects in this capital program that will help address storage deficiencies, which currently are limiting growth within the city. And so that's a key part of the capital program. You see here in green, a couple of projects. City staff have done a great job at going out and getting grants for a couple of, actually the two largest capital projects in this 6 or 7 year window. So that helps offset the cost of the capital program, but the rest would need to be covered through reserves, rate revenues, and then those general facilities charges that we talked about at the beginning of the presentation. Currently in the water utility, there's a general facilities charge that increases by meter size. For a typical single family connection, that would be $1,260. That's for that 3/4 inch meter. And then larger meter sizes would scale up from there. The rate forecast assumes that the city would adopt a $3,000 3/4 inch water meter general facilities charge for 2024. The preliminary numbers suggest a range of $3,000 to $4,000 would be defensible and supportable in terms of the updated numbers. And just to give you a sense of what this could look like with the number of units per year that were provided to us in terms of a forecast, at the current level of your GFC, 200 units per year would generate about $250,000 per year in GFC revenue. While under that $3,000 GFC that we're suggesting, that would bring in about $600,000 per year. So you can get a sense of what types of impact that would mean to adopt that higher GFC. So in total, when you look at that 6-year capital program funding strategy, about 25% we're projecting would come from existing reserves as well as rate revenues each year. You see there 17% we're expecting would come from general facilities charges. Grants are covering nearly 26% of the capital projects over the next 6 years. One part of that pie slice comes from a property sale from earlier this year that's bringing in about $800,000 for the water utility. And then we are projecting to fund the rest of the capital program, about $5.5 million in a future loan a couple of years down the road. So in order to achieve that capital funding strategy, we show what we call the revenue requirement in this graphic here. Each year, the stacked bars represent the financial obligations of the water utility. In that darker color bar at the bottom, those are the annual operating and maintenance costs based on the adopted budget, plus some annual inflationary adjustments in the future. In the green bar, kind of in the middle here, that's your existing debt service obligations for loans already on the books. Just above that, and getting larger towards the end here, is new debt service for borrowing. And then anything above that is rate funded capital coming from rates that can go towards cash funding part of the capital program. So those are the obligations of the utility. And you can see here in the solid black line that I'm highlighting, that's current rate revenues at 2023 rates. So you can see while you are covering your operating and maintenance costs, not quite covering existing debt service. So there is a budgeted drawdown of reserves in 2023. So in order to sort of keep pace with inflation for operating and maintenance, cover existing debt obligations, and to pay for future capital projects, we're suggesting 3 years of 14% rate increases, which would adjust annual rate revenues per the dotted line here. So a 14% rate increase, what we show here is the percentage rate increase in the top number, a typical monthly single family bill, and then what that increase is to that monthly bill. So in 2024, a 14% rate increase would increase a typical water bill from about $46 per month up to $52.54 in 2024. So an increase of about $6.50. After that 3-year phase-in, we're projecting that rates could settle down into that 3% range starting in 2027. Any questions on the water utility before we move into the sewer utility?
No, I just had a question that the capital program, we talked that it wasn't 15, it was probably 20 million. So it's another $5 million that was left out in this report.
Based on the upper angle side,
Yes.
the new calcs, that actually is pushed out.
Okay.
So Jay, correct, I brought up the BHC's estimate for completing the reservoir.
Yeah, correct. It's in there. It's in 2027, $5 million.
Yeah,
Oh,
And that was the loan financing that you saw on that one slide. Right now, it's far enough out that I can't go really get a grant application. I have other grant applications I'm working on, other projects up there, but we'll be looking to try to get a grant for that. But we do need to secure funding for that to continue to allow people to build up there. And so we want to use rates to finance that, right? Because that's the only tool we have right now, because we don't have the general facilities charges because the houses haven't been built yet, right? And so the rates will fund that if we aren't successful in getting any grants towards all or a portion of that reservoir.
and if we don't get that reservoir built, we don't have homes on that side of town.
We don't have any additional homes. We can add some with the $2.2 million project that's in the 2024 budget. That's with the 2 million Commerce grant. We can bring on somewhere around 400 to 500 homes with that and get caught up on our reservoir storage deficiencies. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're right. The 1.8 million, I was down on the next project, but yeah, it's a $1.8 million project that will bring some units online. And to be able to bring on more than about 400, we have to go down to that $5 million project and get that built. So, and it all depends, you know, home building is one of those things that a lot of people are looking at Shelton right now, right? Just because of market reasons. And as you know, it can be boom or bust with single family home housing. They can go really good for 5 years, 10 years, and then you can get nothing for a significant period of time, like what happened in the past. So we need to be prepared to, when the housing wants to come in, that we have the water services available for them, storage in the most part. We'll need another well at the end of the planning horizon. That's like 20 years out. But for now, we need significant reservoir storage projects.
I have a question, a crazy question. Back on slide 4, why is there a utility tax on the water utility and a utility tax on the sewer? If it's the same bill? Or if it's the same, because it's 2 different projects, 2 different items?
the utility taxes support the general fund.
Okay. So I'm just wondering why that's not a combined utility tax. I mean, why it's, there's one on water and there's one on sewer.
Yeah, they're two separate utilities, right? They're two
Okay.
separate funds, or two
I see.
completely separated funds that have to operate on their own revenue stream and their own expenses, right? The water fund cannot support the sewer fund cannot support the
I
water.
did have an individual ask why there's two different utility taxes.
I don't know why the rates are separate, to tell you the truth.
You mean
Um,
different?
Different, sorry.
I don't either.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this person was wondering why there were two. So I'm glad it came up. Okay,
And
thank
other,
you.
other utilities be paying that as well, like Cascade Natural Gas and.
Well, I know there's a utility, but on those, but I'm just thinking it's the same bill that comes out. Two different departments. Yeah, okay.
So I had a question asked me earlier today, which I thought was interesting. They said, we understand that your sewer rates are based off of your water usage. And they said, what about when we're watering our lawns and it's not going directly down a pipe? And I said, well, maybe I'll find out tonight.
We have a seasonal rate. don't we?
Sewer averaging.
Yeah, we do sewer allocation. And if you have, you can also opt to get a sprinkler meter.
Your separate irrigation system, and then you're not paying on that, but Mike can probably explain it better. Essentially what happens in May through
It's June.
June,
We want,
sorry.
we wanna go, to May.
June.
Right, and so we're averaging those bills when you're using what we would consider more average in those late fall and winter months. So that when you are watering your lawn, if you don't have an irrigation account, that's not going against your making your sewer bill higher.
Yeah,
Oh.
June, July, August, September, October are based
Sewer
on your winter water consumption, but
Correct.
November, December, January.
November to May.
Like,
In May.
so basically, whatever you use in the winter time is what they use for your average for the summer, so if your sewer does not go up, it should not go up in the summertime.
Yep.
I know I water.
There's a lot of people not watering in summer.
And then I have a question about slide 10 and it says for connections. Is that just for new builds? The connection, right?
GFCs. Yeah, under our current policy, if there's an existing meter, then GFCs wouldn't apply unless you increase the size of that meter.
Okay.
Right, but if it's a new meter set, the GFCs would apply. As well as, well, for both water and sewer, right? You tap.
Thank you.
Any other questions about water?
Two things. So one of the 200 units here in the growth forecast, that's a number for an illustration, correct? That's not any tie to our historical data. That's just to give us an example of what the difference in the GFC rate would look like at that level, correct?
Correct. So what we looked at with, Peacock Ridge, which is now called Olympic Heights, Coffee Creek and Bayview Estates. 3 to 4 years from now, we could, depending on the market, be at 200 units a year. We're gonna obviously ramp up to that very slowly, 50, 100, 150. Probably peak somewhere around 200 units a year for, I don't know how long, because I can't estimate the future. But pretty typical for that, for this size city to be in the 100 to 200 range. Don't think we're gonna do many more than that. And it'll be up and down a little bit, but that was for purposes of GFC revenue. And so GFC revenue, when it comes in, is not guaranteed funding, right? It does help us with the capital projects for capacity, like a new reservoir, a new well, or a new pipeline. But I can't count on that. I can't, say I got this project planned and I'm hopeful the building's gonna happen, right? I mean, I need the money in the bank, right?
Can you explain on slide 11, borrowing 5.5 million? Grants 4.5, did you add those, will those be added together in the amount of money we need?
Yeah, that's in the revenue strategy. So the borrowing was for the reservoir project up in Angleside.
Okay.
So we can accommodate any future growth up there and finish that out. And then the grants have already been secured. And then also the property sale was included with that.
I got it.
Okay.
And then on slide 12, we're looking at the rate funded capital. How is that calculated? Because it looks like it starts off much lower and then peaks at about what? $500,000 a year?
Yeah, I can take that, Jay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So the rate funded capital is calculated by, when we increase our revenue with the 14% per year, of course, we have to cover our operating and maintenance, existing debt service, and any new debt service. Anything left over is our planned rate funded capital. So the rates are set in a way to cover your cash operating expenses, borrowing costs, and then intentionally set to also throw off a little bit of revenue to rate fund part of your capital program so that you're not overly relying on debt or GFCs to pay for all of it.
And it looks like over the 5 years that are shown there, we're looking at probably what? 2.2 million? Ballpark?
I can look right now on my other screen and give you that answer.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that rate plan, we're looking at water utility. Yeah, about 2.75 million or so over the entire study period.
Thank you.
Get Deputy Mayor Schmidt if he has a question.
Joe, do you have any questions or comments?
Not at the moment, other than I'm not necessarily opposed to what's been presented thus far.
Glad you're there. We can't see you.
That's okay.
so.
Appreciate it.
Okay, Augie, sewer.
All right, move into the sewer utility. I tried to structure it in a similar way, but this capital program has a couple of differences. In some ways, more grants. You've got 3 million grant here, 3.2 million grant here, and a 2 million grant for this project. These have been received and or awarded. There are a few projects in here after discussions with Jay are somewhat grant contingent, meaning that the timing of the projects are not set in stone. So we agreed that assuming some level of grant funding, but not entirely grant funding these projects would be reasonable. So those noted in that more orange color, we assumed 40% grant funding, but these grants have not yet been awarded. I don't think there's applications out, but that's just part of the planning process based on the success the city has gotten in the past and based on the flexibility in the timing of these projects. You can see that this CIP is nearly double that of water. It's closer to $4.5 to $5.5 million per year, nearly $33 million in total over the same planning period. In terms of the sewer utility general facilities charge, right now there's a regular sewer GFC and then a reclaimed water GFC. We'd recommend combining them into a single GFC. And right now, that regular sewer GFC for a new single family connection would be about $3,300. A certain part of town, Grandview Heights, it's less, but in terms of that typical new single family customer, about $3,300. Reclaimed water, not many customers hooking up to that at the moment, but that's much smaller, about $300 per new connection. And just like water, the larger the meter size, the faster these charges scale up. And based on our preliminary calculations, the GFC, the maximum defensible charge, could be somewhere in the range of $12,000 to $15,000. And wanted to point out that's the maximum defensible charge by policy. Council could adopt something less than that or phase into that level over time. For the purposes of the rate forecast, we assumed the council would adopt maybe halfway in between, close to $8,000 for a 3/4 inch water meter, and would be up to council to decide whether you go to the full amount, which we'll come back at a later meeting and share what that is, but could be, a strategy to phase into that over time to provide lead time for development to learn of these potential changes, that sort of thing. But to give you an idea of what the current charge would be for 200 units per year, it's about $650,000 of GSC revenue per year. Under an $8,000 GFC for the sewer utility, that's closer to $1.6 million per year. So it gives you an idea of what type of cost recovery you could be getting from development at the $8,000 level. Sewer utility capital funding strategy does not assume any borrowing above what's already on the books, but it does assume, as we noted, those unsecured grants for those grant contingent projects. So we've got nearly 27% of the capital funding strategy coming from those unsecured grants. 22% has already been secured via awarded grants. About 20% would come from GFCs, new growth as they connect to the system. And then cash reserves, rate funded capital would fund just under 1/3 of the entire capital program through the end of 2029.
Is that 21% based on the $8,000 or the 12?
Yes, based on the $8,000 GFC. In terms of the sewer utility forecast, we can see you've got the same type of setup, operating and maintenance costs, just over $4 million per year. We've got, as Jay mentioned earlier, quite a bit more existing debt service on loans already taken out, which adds nearly another $2 million. And then anything above that would be rate funded capital. So you can see with our annual 4.5% rate increases that are being proposed, you can grow that rate funded capital over time. And that allows you to avoid borrowing in the future, assuming you get some of those unsecured grants out into the future, just as the city has been fortunate enough to get those secured for those 3 projects we talked about earlier. And then I wanted to point out towards the end of the forecast, one of the city's loans is paid off. So you can see the existing debt service drops in 2029. So that might be a good time to double check a few of the numbers to see if how growth is doing in terms of new rate revenue, new GFCs, and whether or not that level of rate adjustment in the future would be needed when that debt service drops off in 2029. Any questions on the sewer utility before we hit the concluding slides?
I just have a question for whoever. So if the GFCs were 12 to 15,000, would that reduce the need to raise the regular rates? Or because it said sewer revenue requirement on the 8,000 GFCs?
It could, assuming we had good growth actually happened, right? We don't have any imperative sewer projects that are limiting growth right now, like in the water utility. So over time, yes, it would definitely help out the capital part of the sewer program.
Thank you.
Any other questions about sewer?
Okay, we'll move on to the conclusion. And here's where we will share those monthly rate surveys as well as the single family GFC surveys. The first one here is the monthly single family rate survey. We've got water bills shown in the darker blue color at the bottom, and then the sewer portion of the bills shown in the green color on top. And we worked with Jay to come up with a list of comparable utilities, and then also added some regional utilities. And those comparable utilities, we looked at number of residences, whether or not they had their own sewer and water treatment plants versus a regional sewer treatment, for example, with Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater. They have it hooked up to a regional treatment service. So it's a mix of regional cities, also a mix of those maybe more comparable utilities, similar size, going through similar types of things. You can see their typical single family customer in the city of Shelton paying about $160 per month. With the rate adjustments proposed in the presentation here tonight, would go up to about $170 per month. In contrast, the city's single family GFCs, these are one-time charges paid by development upfront, are at the opposite end, on the lowest end of the survey group. You can see here the current charges add up to about $4,500. The next closest would be Washougal, Monroe, kind of in the $11,000 to $12,000 range. And there's quite a few in the region that are in that sort of $15,000 to $16,000 range. And Lacey there at the top, about $20,000. There are a lot of caveats to go along with these types of surveys. Some of these may be newer utilities or older utilities going through different phases of asset reinvestment, cities of different sizes, all sorts of different variables, but certainly striking to see on the monthly rates among the highest, and in the general facility charge among the lowest. So as Jay mentioned earlier, higher GFCs can have a benefit on monthly rates over the long term if we're able to capture that growth as it occurs.
If I can jump in really quick, I guess another way of saying that, if we would have been collecting the appropriate GFCs historically, when we reached an environmental emergency at the sewage treatment plant, we would have had the capital, or we would have had a plan and the capital to replace the sewage treatment plant outside of debt service, which would have ultimately decreased our monthly utility costs because we wouldn't have such high of debt service. So the correlation between GFCs and monthly utility payments, and that's the line I'm drawing. So as we're setting these rates and GFCs in particular moving forward, thinking about what happened in the past and trying to prevent that from happening in the future, I think is pretty important. So.
Question. All right, so it's hard to do with your summary, slide 10 and slide 20. Is it have to be $3,000 for the GFC for the water? And the reason I ask has a lot to do with this. I was thinking this correlation before we got to this page where we're at right now. So you do your one-time fee. If you do it more than $3,000, they only have to pay it once. Does that bring that 14% down that they have to pay on the monthly? So let's say we adopt, instead of a $3,000, I'm just going to throw a random number. Let's say $4,500, right? Does that bump it up enough that we don't have to hit their monthly?
Well, as growth happens, it would over time, if you go to the higher GFC rates, that, and when we go back in, because it take projects.
Right.
So as the development comes in and you charge higher GFCs, the projects get paid more by the development end. And a few years from now, when we come back and do a rate study, those projects are being higher funded by the development community, but it's still not a guaranteed revenue source, right?
I think slide 12 demonstrates that perfectly, because with the higher GFC, that addresses your rate funded capital, which is kind of the brown color at the top, and that doesn't kick in until 2025. So the GFCs wouldn't necessarily, depending on what's realized through development, wouldn't necessarily kick into that rate funded capital until 2025.
But I mean, to be blunt, it's not even only what growth we see, but what we have capacity to allow. Right, so if we have a
Yes.
project and want to move in tomorrow, and we're charging great GFCs, but we don't have the capacity to add them to their system. Which in some parts of town is the reality. We have to be able to fund that, and so GFCs can't back fund that.
Nope.
Mm-mm.
And how many GSCs did we collect last year?
I think, I know there's about 11 single families, well, there's a couple duplexes, I believe, so it was,
Less than.
and I don't know about business.
Couple- couple fast
We can
food
certainly, we
restaurants.
can certainly get that.
Gotcha.
Well, that wasn't the last year, I don't believe, right? That was a
Before
while ago.
Years, I-
Yeah, exactly.
Time flies,
Um,
but
I'd hasten to guess that, you know, if it's much more than 25.
Okay. So I mean, the difference would be about like $130,000 from what we want to raise them to what we would have collected. We would have collected about an extra $130K
You know,
if we did 20.
yeah, the 49 houses built in Shelton Springs and
Gotcha.
16, 17, that starts making more of a
Yeah.
dent. But we start looking at, I think, 5 years, I looked at single family residences, then it was, I don't know, 70 houses or something like that, single family, there certainly there's commercial development with larger meters, with a higher GFC that would apply. I think some of the fast food places is, I'd have a 2-inch. Meter, so it's higher, higher GFC rate at that point, but certainly not the volume that moves the needle very much.
Gotcha. So even if we went with those 70s, we're talking just shy of $500,000.
That helps.
That
That gives
does.
us 400, right? Today, that gives us 400 more additional units on the
Yeah.
Ingleside pressure zone, right, without incurring debt service there, but.
Well, I think, looking at the numbers, I was like, wow, why aren't we catching up with our GFC rates in the future? I think that's like number one thing we should do. And secondly, I don't know if we can somehow ameliorate the 14% punch in the gut for the next 3 years to make our 3%. So that's my feedback. It's like, we can only get to the Lacey and Tumwater rates if we have high GFCs in the future. So I'm just concerned about the punch in the gut for the next 3 years for 14%. But
It'll be more than that, though, being realistic about it, just running those numbers. Look, if we do 25 a year, we're gonna collect an extra 130 grand a year.
right,
140 grand
and
a
we're
year.
hoping for 200.
So
I mean,
when we have the development, we can afford to bring in that because we have the water capacity. I mean, there's people waiting in the wings that want to come in and do 200 homes. But right now, they can't start breaking ground right now, even if we wanted to. We don't have the capacity.
so we need to have a plan to have an increased quantity and keep our quality of water for future development and for bay oysters and for whatever we use just living here for our clean water. So I think in the future, it's prudent for us to start thinking about how can we capitalize, get more grants, maybe get our grant writer to get huge grants, to get huge water projects, to get our 200 units in here per year, and then eventually in 5 or 6 years, get our water rates to a level where we're competing with the other municipalities.
Well, and you hit a good point that when you add more users to the system, you have more revenue, right?
And then hate to use the word, but we're socializing the risk or the cost.
Correct. You're dividing the
So
cost.
it's like insurance rates, but if the insurance rates will go
But
down
then-
if we have more people in the system.
Adding GFC, adding new building and everything, that just puts a strain on our sewer plant, so then we have to build that out.
Yeah. And,
But that's
you know,
what's doing it.
Yeah.
It's giving us capacity.
some of us remember our GFCs were up here around 11,000 or even maybe more and lowered them for an experiment back in 14, 15 to try to spur growth. It didn't spur anything. I mean,
Yeah,
a little.
but timing on the real estate market had a lot to do with that as
Yeah.
well. So I mean, it's,
Yeah.
there's other factors than just that. I mean, like, if we had our GFCs, well, we still didn't have a lot of building.
Yeah.
No.
So it's,
There is a direct correlation between the GFCs and the rates, but it's just not as immediate.
But it is long term,
Yeah.
all right?
It
It is.
But you can look at the one with the higher GFCs and you flip over to the rates. And
Oh.
they're all on the low end, but that wasn't overnight that they got there, so those rates have been set higher. over time.
Well, I'm comfortable with the recommendations and I'm comfortable with them. I mean, I think we should move forward with them. But also I'd like to look, if we could maybe find some kind of program for senior discounts a little bit cheaper than we already do. You know, I think it's gonna add, you know, down the road is probably by 29, it's gonna add quite a bit to the bill, so.
I mean, we're looking at just the base rate plus the utility taxes going from roughly 171 to 239, so it's about a $68 difference. Start to finish at the base rate.
But yeah, I'm comfortable moving forward with.
That's what we want to hear. We want consensus. Obviously, this is a public hearing. We'll have a public hearing. We can have another study session if you like. So we want to garner your feedback, want to garner some options, want to be able to provide you more information that we might not be able to provide you today. Answer all your questions again tonight, though, and then bring this back to you, whether it's a study session or back for a public hearing. I think we tentatively have it slated for September 15th. Does that sound right, Jay?
The September 5th.
Yeah, sorry.
First
I
meeting in
don't-
September.
Yeah, but
And then
certainly.
the second hearing will be what, the 19th?
Certainly there is some information we need to have forward to us so we can budget appropriately, right? And we need to have to make some decisions on levels of service. If we don't meet some of these recommendations, we have to address, you know, our day-to-day operations, obviously. And not to mention potentially those long-term capital projects at the same time. So we need a little planning. If that means if we kick it back from September 5th, we're happy to do that to meet the council's needs. So we're happy to take any comments, questions.
So if we find more grants, our debt service will be lower in the future too, because we won't have to bond anything.
Yeah, we offset, you know, the CIP costs, right? But by a grant from what we anticipated to pay for through rates or GFCs, absolutely, it could
So
very,
it would
very well reduce
It's
that.
of us to cooperate with our local municipalities and get these big water projects going.
Yeah, they're competitive grants. We've had some good luck with our state delegation over there, like most recently, the $1.8 million for the upper Angleside booster zone. There's no guarantees. We're going into a session that's you know, the interim, I guess, you know, is 1 year out, so there's not as much money available through the state legislature this next term, so we can cross our fingers, we can ask for some funds, obviously, nothing that we can.
I, for one, want to make sure that we have a huge quantity of water and the best quality of water, and that we increase our department size to have the capacity to have more projects come in and raise the number of housing and the tax base and the cleanness and while maintaining the uniqueness and the cleanness of our water systems here. That's my direction, and hope we can go towards that.
So
I think it's
you're
worth-
okay moving forward with these recommendations.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have one more question, if I may. Looking at the utility taxes, the 11.63 and the 5%, if or when would those be up for discussion? Because that's something that we haven't talked about how that impacts the rate. Or at least the bill, I should say.
Yeah. What would you like to see, I guess? We can bring that back through the study session on the 22nd, with our budget study session. That'll be more specific to the general fund, I think, than what you'll see through utilities, but we can certainly show you what has been collected on an annual basis, what we project, and how that affects the general fund.
How do you,
Absolutely. And how that affects, obviously.
So you'd like to see, based on this rate increase, what would that mean with the current tax,
I mean,
utility tax?
because I've penciled it out, if we kept the existing utility tax on top of this model that's proposed. But I don't know when's the last time we examined, is that the right utility tax? And is that something that we've considered?
well, and how do you come, I don't understand how you come up with that percentage utility tax.
You probably voted on it.
We'll, yeah.
Your idea.
We'll do a little research and see when those were raised, if we have some background from study sessions, when they were established and when they're raised, and see if we can find some historical data for you.
Yeah,
Certainly, if you raise the utility rate and you have, keep the same utility tax associated, it generates more money, right, for the general fund.
sure.
So obviously, if you so chose, you could certainly adjust that utility rate, knowing what its impacts would be on the general fund. We can supply that to you.
And in general, I appreciate this direction. I don't think any of us want to see the rates increase, but I think there's a reality that we're facing in order to maintain our system and serve our residents. The only thing I do wonder is what it would look like if instead of 14.3, we maybe split over those first 4 years at 11.25% before dropping back down, what that would do to our overall funds coming in. Because I think hovering right around 10-11% is not abnormal for the cost increase. And it may be something that we can't absorb, but I'd be interested to see what the figures might look like.
And why we went from 14% to 3%. Like,
Because at that point, we're actually pulling in the funding that we need to do
Yeah.
for the projects.
Yeah, you gotta go back and look
Right.
at the scale that
That's
shows
slide
where
12.
we are.
Based in that, again, that is based on some growth, right?
Right.
Yeah, so that's why it goes to 3%, because you can incur or pay for some of that rate funded capital that can decrease.
Right, okay.
Based on
But-
GFCs.
Right now, we're not even funding operating and maintenance. We're below the line.
Yes.
So we're not taking enough money in to pay the bills right now. So we have to put general fund money to.
No, it's reserve, it's fund balance, out of water. We have, the general fund's not supporting the utilities at this point. No.
But eventually, if you don't do something, then you run out of reserves.
Yeah. That's a
I think that
great
happens in my day.
So
Yeah, can only go
the
so far.
14%, like Deidre said, what about 10%?
I'm just saying over 4 years, so
Over
stretching
4
the
years.
same increase, but just stretching it over 4 years instead of 3, before
Right.
dropping it would be a
So,
consideration.
Toggy, did you catch that comment from council? What happens if we just
Yes.
stretch it out like to year 5, that sort of thing, and, smooth it over a longer period?
Yes, I did catch that. We can take a look at that to see if that's feasible, given the capital program and the timing provided.
And it may not be, but.
Well, the 14% for 24 doesn't even cover operating and maintenance. We have to go up at least 14% in 24. Or otherwise, we're still not paying the bills. We're. So, I mean, I guess I would say if you want to do that, let's go to 15% for 24 and then go to 10%. 10 and 10. That way, we're at least probably getting up there to that line.
Because there's gonna be,
Does that make sense?
people are like 14%, that's.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, these are all hard numbers for me to look at.
Okay,
I'm
so,
looking at this with somebody who pays more than a dozen plus water bills a month, and they're gonna go up 14%. I'm looking at somebody who builds homes in town who's doubling my GFCs.
I get it.
These are hard numbers to swallow.
Yeah.
I look at the data and I understand it.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just like balancing your checkbook. You gotta make more money or you gotta stop paying. But like, what do we do here? But I mean, trust me, my guts and turning. I'm like, God, I should go to, I can go to Lacey and pay the same amount and have lower utility bills. But
for that,
I believe in Shelton, so it's
yeah,
hard.
that just
I'm still not
says-
100% on board, but
That just
not
says how
necessarily.
much we need building.
yeah,
Revenue.
no, it's hard, it's hard.
So back to kind of carrying this out maybe over 4 years or something. Do you want to see a percentage, or just can we give you what's appropriate maybe that after analyzing the data, what that looks like for, okay, yes. What that looks like as far as our maintenance operations, our existing debt service, right? We have to cover those first and foremost. Those aren't gonna go away. We can cut some of our maintenance and operations,
I
right?
don't think we have that much. left to
But
cut.
that is a slippery slope, right, to walk down, right? Because we start letting our facilities further deteriorate, as you heard. They're fairly aging. We have a lot of infrastructure in place. We have limited staff to take care of those. We start walking the fine line. So I
I
would
mean,
recommend that.
I had someone say to me the other day, why is everything looking dry and grungy in Shelton, around Shelton? I said, well, it may get worse, but we had to cut services. We've had to cut things back. When you do that, that's what
Well,
happens.
most of those areas are general fund areas too,
Yeah.
right? They pay the same utility rates that commercial and residential customers do. Our Parks Department pays the same water rates for irrigation account.
Oh, yeah.
Park and the field the same way. So
Yeah,
these are independent utility funds, right?
yeah.
So I looked at my water bill yesterday. And so I'm scratching my head, I know what I pay. And at first I was thinking the overall bill and I was trying to multiply that and I was like, oh wait, that's not what they're gonna add, all right? So it's the actual base of that, the water itself and the sewer charge itself, and that's where it comes into play. So I did the math and our water bill is pretty high at my house. Like there's $5 using the water. Small house, but a lot of showers. Anyways, so I did the math and with these rate increases, it comes to an increase from this bill would be $12.34. I can handle that if that means we have the services that we need and I hate it when we're in the red.
And to piggyback off that, Sharon, I think one other thing that we have not looked at recently is the, I guess, community funded needs option on this. Like, is there a roundup option on the bill? Like with your PUV bill that goes to the
Mhm.
project share. I know we used to have a Citizens of Shelton, we had little pamphlets in our office for a long time.
Yeah.
But you
Support our Sheltons.
yeah, support our Sheltonians program, but I don't know that we're necessarily utilizing it, because there's a lot of people who would probably say. Round up 8 cents.
Yeah,
round up
whatever.
92 cents, whatever, and granted, again, it's not a lot of money, but that might allow us to look at something like Marianisco was discussing. In providing some offset for those in our community who need a temporary relief.
It adds up.
Mhm.
It does.
And I did want to comment too on the new infrastructure taxing the treatment plants and stuff. That's usually not realized until further out, so you have some time to catch up because it's a tight line system, it's brand new, it's not leaking in and adding infiltration. The water pipes are newer, so there's not as much maintenance.
Like a new car.
Yeah. I'll go back to that. I think we just need to adopt what was recommended by FCS and just be. Get results out of it.
Well, I'd like to
out of
see
the
the-
red.
I like to see those numbers and
I personally don't like them. I
I don't think anyone likes them.
but, I think we need to do it. And the GFCs, I think, do need to go up. They were lowered for an experiment that didn't work and,
But you tried it.
we tried it and. Let it go quite a few years. I mean, like 7 years, I think. And we 70 homes in 7 years, so. Averaging 10 homes a year. Average, it didn't 1 homes a year, but. It didn't work and now we can't build infrastructure because we don't have the money. And we don't want to borrow another $50 million for a treatment plant in 10 years. And if we don't do something, we will be borrowing $50 million. To do that. So we need that water tank built in the next few years and,
Yesterday,
it's gonna take 3 years. Even if we decided today to build a water tank, it's gonna take 3 years, Jay said. So,
So my rate increase would be 2 coffees.
what did you say?
our rate would be 2 coffees.
2 coffees a day.
But, so I think that I would go ahead and go with the recommendations. I don't know about everybody else.
but it sounded like you wanted to increase that first year to cover cost.
Well. I'm saying that if you wanted to go 10%, we should do that 15, but this recommendation from FCS and the staff is comfortable with these recommendations as well, and we should probably just go ahead and do them and be done with it.
We're comfortable with the data,
Yeah.
right? Let's be clear. We're not comfortable with the rating.
No,
Right.
right.
It's not something that
I'm not comfortable.
we relish bringing to you. We're comfortable with the data. Jay and Brent have worked really hard on this as well as other staff. We have all the confidence in the FCS group and the information they're providing to us. We're happy to manipulate that if you want to see that worked over, a longer period of time. We certainly can bring that to you. Absolutely. It's not a comfortable situation for staff either. We feel the same way as council, but we're comfortable with the data.
And thank you for making this process very data driven. To be able to show exactly what the need is, how we can fund it and why this has to happen.
I think 10.5% over 4 years is the easier pill to swallow than 14% over 3 years.
Like I
Um,
said, though, 2 copies.
Just, I mean,
Psychological for the
But-
customer.
but I don't know if that,
I think we
Will
want to
that-
show you that though,
Yeah.
right?
See,
I hate to make
Show
that.
where it moves.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'd like-
I hate to just say that that's,
Yeah.
that's the way to
Yeah,
go
I'd like
unless
to
you,
see
unless
it.
you kind of see it.
I want to
what
see
it
that,
does.
I'd like to see the numbers instead of just going,
I know,
Yeah.
I heard that from Councilmember McDowell, heard that from Councilman.
I'm okay with, with the mayor, but I prefer looking at the compromise.
Yeah,
We have to look at it. If it's
Yeah.
not feasible,
Okay.
then.
well,
Yeah,
I'm
it's
just
not
looking at
feasible.
just the maintenance operation, 10.5% a year for even 3 years doesn't bring us, doesn't cover maintenance. It doesn't, it's right there, there's your.
Well, we
data.
can bring it to you, how it affects the fund balance, right?
Yeah, I would like to see
If we
it.
go 10.5, it comes with 42. If we go to 11%, we get the 2% break. I don't know.
Is that okay? You'd like to see it at least?
We can see it,
to
yeah.
review it?
I'd like to see the GFC for water be a little bit higher.
Okay, I believe they're still analyzing that a bit.
They are.
correct? Yeah. so-
Yeah. And so with the GFC for water and sewer, they both have the potential to go up a little bit. I know on the sewer end, they were in the rates, they have 8,000
Right.
in there, and it can go up from there. I mean, you said the historic one was 11,000 around, which is comparable to a lot of the other
I
cities.
think it's lower than one.
Has to be defensible though, right? It has to be matched to our CIP
Absolutely.
program. This can't be an arbitrary number, it has to be matched to our CIP.
Correct.
So we wanna
100%.
So if you don't mind, can we bring this forward at the 5th and you can look at them both? Are you comfortable with that, not having another study session
I'm
to
comfortable.
see that?
Yeah.
And see it at the council meeting?
Under business item or?
Yeah, under business and a public hearing and.
I'm with Councilmember Sherman. If we can go to 11,000 and justify it, let's go.
I was talking about water. You're talking about sewer.
Okay, well, either.
Okay,
Well, yeah, and it gives you those in here, it's the justifiable right now, they're gonna fine tune it, but it's up to 4,000 for water.
Now you're pushing.
So, I mean, just,
Well,
but that's, you guys get to set that.
I'd love to see those slide up too, because I mean, we're gonna throw them on these first couple of years and
Yeah.
it's not gonna be a big developer that gets hit with that.
Yeah.
It's gonna be the one-offs. But if we slide, as we come closer to the time where we're close to being able to build a water tower, we're close to being able to get that, it starts kicking in now when the 200 home guy comes. We're stepping into that where we actually realize big capital,
Yeah.
not hitting the 20 people a year that are building
Yeah.
homes. Because what happens with that goes to 10 people now, we're still right where we were.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Correct.
just like if the 2016 one, would we have built 70 homes in that amount of years, or would we built 35? So, because it's a significant increase, and you're doubling what those GFCs are, you're now taking it up from $10,000+ to almost 20, because by the time you start going through all the fees that you're paying, not just GFCs, but all the other fees to get water, sewer. I mean, it's a substantial increase. And home values haven't shot up, interest rates are high and possibly rising again, we're not in a frenzied market. So just maybe a slide on that. To where we're hitting $11,000-12,000 in 25, 26.
is that for both water and sewer?
That would, I mean,
Conceptually.
we're all throwing things out. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna throw out what.
Conceptually, that's why we're here.
So you're talking about aligning it essentially with the build out of the system. So as we have
Potentially.
capacity to add that to the
Yes,
system, then the
because-
GFCs would take on a greater role.
Correct,
essentially.
because I mean, if we're gonna have 200 GFCs in a year, heck yeah, we want $11,000, but
Yeah.
we're gonna have 15 or 20. Yes, we will realize more capital on that, but once again, we're going into speculation. We now only have half the people building homes, because now why am I gonna do it here when I have to pay the same amount as I pay somewhere else and get cheaper utilities? So,
Some of it does pay debt service though,
yeah,
right? For projects that are completed ahead of time to
Yeah.
facilitate that growth, right? That's the conundrum that you're in.
yeah,
The chicken and the egg,
absolutely.
yeah.
Well, you got part of the city that doesn't want growth, wants to keep shelter, quiet and sleep little town.
Wow.
So they don't want, but to get this all. To get it where we need to be, we need that revenue, we need the houses, we need the
Yeah.
GFCs.
We've
we
got a
need-
great Venn diagram we can share with you that shows, low rates, no growth, and in the middle of that Venn diagram is basically, impossible,
Right.
That growth has to spread that burden amongst the ratepayers. And if it doesn't, then the existing ratepayers bear that burden.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then you don't see it. So we'll share that through our budget process. It's a great illustration of kind of that conundrum that we have in a small town like this, because I have friends as well here, and they have well-paying jobs, right? They're comfortable with their home ownership and everything. They like it how it is. And they don't want to see that growth. There's others that need that growth to support their businesses, to provide
right.
more housing, give opportunities for their kids or grandkids,
Support the
maybe to
seniors
live
that
and
are
stay,
paying-
and stay in this
Yeah.
community that you might want to stay in. We need job centers, we need that economic development.
Yeah.
That all hinges on infrastructure. Water and sewer are critical.
Yeah.
Here, here.
Yeah, we met mayors and council members last year at EWC that haven't done half of what we've done. They're looking, some of them were looking at having to borrow $100 million. And some cities are smaller than ours. I mean, we don't want to. We don't want to, no, we don't want to do
Definitely.
that.
I'm not here fighting to keep us in the 40s for rates. It's just,
Yeah,
I do look at it from a different side. Not one of you are gonna pay these fees probably ever in your life. And if you do, you'll do it once. So I'm talking about the guy that's doing it 3 times a year, 4 times a year, and that is his livelihood. You've just literally taken a quarter of their profit away from them. So it's a balance. And like I said, I mean, it is different when you're spreading it out over a 200 home project and you're having those costs come in. There's because the people that are developing in Shelton aren't you know 8-figure earners. They're people that are flipping a house or selling a house and they're making $40,000-$50,000 off that before taxes, not $250,000 off that. So when I'm making $50,000 and you're taking $8,000 more away from me, you're denting me. It almost becomes cost prohibitive as a small investor. So, do
it'd be nice if we get all these small investors now to actually use these infill lots that we've waived. GFCs on and get some houses built
Yeah,
on
no,
them.
and I agree.
But yeah.
I'd love to see more too, and
Yeah.
I don't think that the solution to that is, let's cut it more, because we can't do that, but.
But if you're flipping a house, it's already there, so you're not paying that again, right?
Well, when I say flip, whether you're building a new construction home to sell or, I mean, of course, a flip is different, but like,
I just wanted to say that on
Yeah.
record so people don't get confused.
well, yeah, people flip new homes too. So I mean, however, you're correct, you're correct.
Deputy Mayor, haven't heard from you much.
No, my biggest thing with utility rates. So when are we expecting to go through this exercise again? I guess. How often? No. How often are we doing rate studies for water and sewer? 5 years? 3 years?
I'd recommend 3 and 4 maximum, just because we have the debt dropping off on the sewer. I'd like to take a look at that in the near, when we get closer to that. And then also see what's happening with the GFCs. We're estimating some units happening. If those don't happen, or if they're greater, it's just a good opportunity that we're making a significant adjustment right now. You want to fine tune at year 4 from now, right? And so I recommend go 3 years worth of rates, look at it again. It's a significant process, obviously with FCS. The data alone, I mean, ask Mike, we have been emailing for months now. So my fingers are worn out because FCS asks every question in the world. A good job, you guys.
Learned a lot.
But at the end of the day, that bulk of the information has already gone to them. They know our processes, they know our financials. And I'd go 3 years on the rates and then look at them at year 4 would be my recommendation. Toggy, you do these for a lot of other places. What's your thought?
Yeah, every 3 to 4 years is pretty common. Some will go every 1 or 2 years for smaller updates. Some utilities will wait. Every 6 years was pretty common back when water comprehensive plans were every 6 years, but those have been kicked out, I think, to every 10 years. So yeah, I think that's a pretty common timeline. A lot can change in 3 to 4 years. And as Jay mentioned, you could get more or less growth, you could get more or less grants, debt service is dropping off for sewer in part. So
Yeah, understand. kind of where I'm going with that is with the utility billing. Since day one of being a Shelton resident, I guess I've just craved stability. And I believe stabilizing our rates in a way that makes sense is a good idea. And to get there, I understand we have to climb a mountain. But I agree and I appreciate the process because in my opinion, to get to some stability in our rate structures, we need to know what we have, the assets that we have, the condition our assets are in, and then appropriately program those assets to be maintained and replaced at some point in time. And at the same time, we also need to have a high degree of confidence in what is coming in terms of growth and change in our community. And I believe through our comprehensive planning processes and our other partnerships that we should have, on top of some design and standards that we've revisited in development, we should have a pretty good idea of what could be facing the city in the next several years. So I guess while it is discouraging to look at the bottom line numbers, it is encouraging to me that we are climbing to a point where we will stabilize. We will get out of the critical emergencies where we're borrowing large sums of money and causing drastic effects. We will get a handle on our capital programs because we will replace things when they need to be replaced because we will appropriately fund them. And we won't have to see these large spikes in the future. So I'm excited to see that. Not so happy with the growth in the bill at the end of the month, but understanding that for the long term, this is the better decision. I'm supportive of what was presented today. And I'm encouraged to kind of hear the conversation move forward as we get towards action on that. So thank you to everybody involved.
And also we're in line for probably some grants from the federal government that could maybe change us in a couple of years, correct? If we were to get a wish list,
Certainly hope so.
it could change some of this. We still need to plan for the future. We still don't want, even if we got all the money we wanted from the government, we built everything we wanted, we're still gonna have stuff in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Labor is gonna go up 3 to 5% every year, no matter what. Light bills are gonna go up.
But I think it's important that we are basing these
Yeah.
rates on what we need, given what
Yeah.
we know now.
No,
And then we can absolutely adjust as new information comes in. And thank you to
Yeah.
staff and FCS group, because if we don't have the right information going in, we're not able to make a good decision, as hard as it is. So thank you very much.
And what is the, what's the word I want to use? How much are we paying per month on the sewer?
The bond payment
Debt
or
service.
debt?
Debt service.
Well, we pay it annually. We can certainly get that information for you.
Okay.
Let you know. I don't think it was in here exactly, but we can share that.
It's not refined, yeah. Okay,
Did you think you got what you need, or do we need to go around the table?
I think I'm okay.
Anybody have any further comments or questions about this? It's really tough, I think.
I guess if
No.
council members, and my only feedback on this, just based on some historical, if council members, after we adjourn from this, I'm sure phones are going to ring from our typical community members who are interested in these topics, and others. So if you hear something that is a better solution or some serious feedback, please make sure that gets shared with the rest of the group sooner than later so we can redirect or bring something back to Mark. So we're not at the action item and then making a line item adjustment and cutting things in half or whatever we're doing. So that's my only feedback, is if there's ideas out there, I'm all on board to hear things out. I'm not solidly set one way or the other. I agree with the presentation, but if there's a better mousetrap, I'm always interested in hearing it. So I encourage conversation. So thanks.
I think that's it, sir. Thank you,
Thank you,
FCS
Augie.
group.
Thank you very much.
Augie,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Right.
Thank
Okay. Does anybody want a break? I think we have a couple of new items for discussion tonight. Okay, how about a 5-minute recess?
And you now, state.
Deputy Mayor, are you back?
Hey, I'm back.
All right. We're gonna go for new discussion. I think that city
Yep.
manager, basically, got city manager report for us tonight first.
A
Yeah.
little bit, yeah. I certainly want to focus on some of the efforts down in Brewers specifically, and some of the opportunities the city's taken with some of our local service providers. So I know that it's been a topic of conversation, both publicly and and I think privately amongst community and rumors and everything else. So we want to make sure that we want to communicate with you, the council, and the public that it's not being left or unaddressed necessarily. I can tell you in the last week and a half, I've had 5 meetings amongst service providers, and then some activity down at Brewer Park. When I see activity, I mean coordinating with Crossroads Housing, Community Lifeline, Shelton Youth Connection, our local police department, our existing city staff, and in providing some cleanup. We've taken about 1/2 ton of garbage out of there over 2 instances, last Thursday and just yesterday on Monday morning. Our local service providers have provided outreach to the individuals down there, give them opportunities to take advantage of some of the services here, provide some intake as such, and progressively work with them to try to find a better solution for them rather than what's happening down in the park now. We have some great service providers and the agencies I just mentioned. They're really engaged in this. They have limited resources to a certain extent, but there are some resources available. Community Lifeline has some beds available at times. The individuals are being offered those beds. Not all of them are taking advantage of those beds. So that's when the decision-making process comes in, right? We have a camping ordinance, we have some park regulations. So what happens at that point if we go to a level of enforcement where people aren't taking advantage of these opportunities? Where do these individuals go? What's reasonable for them, right? Because they're dealing with situations that I think that are hard to fathom, hard for us to understand at all times, right? We have people dealing with mental health issues, substance issues, chronic homelessness, abuse, and things like that, that put them in these situations. So we want to be strategic. We want to be as thoughtful as we can with these individuals, but we also want to lessen the impact and residual impact as it moves outside of Brewer Park into the community and the neighborhood. If enforcement occurs, a number of these individuals will be somewhere in our community. And so how does that impact our downtown, our residents, our business community, and our first responders? To a certain extent, having, and I'll call it an encampment at this point, having something like that is easier for first responders, frankly, right? You've got folks in one location, they're not spread out up on the hillsides, other areas that might be inaccessible at all times, and not being able to respond to some of the needs that occur there. Certainly it intensifies that use around that neighborhood, and we're seeing the impacts, we're hearing the impacts from the neighbors down there, and we're really sympathetic to what's happening and trying to address that the best we can. So we are having ongoing conversations. I appreciate Colleen Carmichael and Coyote Communities, and as you know, been to basically every meeting and offering services. She is, I think, calling or emailing me every day, talking about opportunities to provide more permanent supportive housing in the community. I know that Tanya and everybody at Crossroads Housing is certainly interested in that as well too, as we've had some conversations there. Community Lifeline has reached out. We met with Congressman Kilmer on Friday. They have a funding application with HUD to hopefully provide an alternate location for shelter services. And then Susan Kirchhoff with Shelton Youth Connection has been involved too, performing outreach for the population that falls within that, their services. So those individuals, adults are what we're dealing with mostly down there, single adults, are kind of the need that we have down there right now. And the ability to find some resources for them, make sure that, like I said, we can serve them. But also, I will say that some might need more than just help. Some need some assistance, and if that's some level of enforcement or whatever it might take, that might be the case at times, because we do have people that are coming to that area for the wrong reasons. And so we need to be able to enforce upon that and address that issue at the same time. So it's an evolving issue. It's one that we're trying to address systematically with our partners in the community, but I just want to update the council at this time, and we'll certainly do our best to continue to move forward, make sure that we're providing the best services that we can down there.
Thank you. It's been very complicated. Excuse me.
I was just asking Deidre.
It's been very complicated situation down there, and I know that we've had multiple meetings and get-togethers with all of the partners, and we've had meetings with sheriffs and nonprofits and the county Commissioner Sharon Trask and the health department, and you know, we've been really knocking our heads together to try to figure out what is the best solution for down there. So thank you for leading us and getting some of this stuff going. And anybody else have any questions for Mark?
It's Community Lifeline, did they discontinue feeding them?
Not completely, no.
Okay,
I'm all for maximum enforcement when people aren't willing to take the services we're willing to provide. The problem is that we haven't enforced anything. So it just breeds more of the negative stuff that we have. I get it. My heart bleeds for the people that want help and need help. But there's people that don't want it, don't take it, and then we still don't enforce on it. And that's where the biggest issue comes into me. Once we start enforcing, that sect will start to decrease. Because we're a free-for-all right now. You come, you camp, you get told to move, you tell them no, what do? They walk away. And so I'm for maximum enforcement of anything that we can enforce.
And there was an enforcement action. I don't know if you want to talk about it, but there was an enforcement action down there. Recently, yesterday.
Yeah.
So
Perfect.
it is starting, but still, we still have to have you guys available to do enforcement.
Yep.
So-
And I agree.
Community Lifeline has,
Yep.
you know, opened up beds. They've come over and they've removed trespass orders in order to get people in the facility. So they're a willing partner at this point, and that's the key, right? But
It is.
the camping ordinance needs to have those.
It does, and
Yeah.
it does have teeth now, because now we do have the ability to take them somewhere. And it's been a long going problem, and we've been paralyzed by fear of the unknown of, are we gonna get sued as a city? But we're giving up our city. At this point, I'd rather get sued and enforced and deal with it. And I feel like the majority of our constituents would be behind that, because they're being negatively affected by those aspects of it. So that,
But I
I'm
think
I'm
it's,
about enforcement.
I think it's important to clarify too, though, that the camping ordinance is just one piece of that, right? Like, if there is drug paraphernalia in use, if there is crime being committed, that is actionable, separate from the issue of
Absolutely right.
But there's
whether or
been-
not someone is.
there's
I
been
want to
action
remind us that
Absolutely.
we had a task force on the complexity of the homelessness population, and just doing one thing is not going to be sufficient. So yes, enforcement is part of the plan, but we also need to provide housing. We should have been going after a housing first option, but we're not. We're going after a net zero kind of let's just keep it as it is kind of approach. And that's not being, I think, pushed fast enough. And part of the problem is we have people who don't want a location in their backyard. And even though we agreed at the meetings to create a mitigation site away from downtown, the site we selected is East Street landfill, and that's probably gone and out. So we need to start thinking about, if we do have a mitigation camp, where is it going to be in the city? And who's going to accept that, and who's going to think about, if we don't start thinking about housing first, we're going to keep doing this over and over and over again until we're like other cities that have huge encampments. So
They allow those huge encampments, though. That's the whole thing is we don't want to allow those huge encampments. We need to move those on.
But I'm just saying, there's not one approach and just not one problem we can hammer the nail in to say that that's gonna solve it.
No.
I'm gonna say that's part of it. And we've talked to law enforcement about it, and we've talked about where do these people need to go? Are we gonna send it to municipality $130 a night? What are we gonna do with them? Are we gonna, so,
Yeah,
I mean,
support
so
that.
I'm just saying, like, okay, why don't we have a mitigation site that costs $90 a night to for people? And I'm just saying, like, there are more solutions than just
You get
counting.
sober in the squalor, you don't in a county.
So let's work through some of those solutions.
Yeah.
Rather than arbitrarily deciding how these individuals are gonna be potentially served, right?
I don't want to thug these people.
I'm encouraged to hear that the city is taking a leadership role in having conversations and being a partner with the people who are experts in this area. We as city council, city staff, this is not our wheelhouse. Like, I think it's really important that we look at what capacity we have and can support that, but looking at the providers and seeing how do we move that and tackling that piece of it and making small, it's gonna take time to chip away at that. It's not gonna happen right, and it is one piece of the puzzle, but we have to be working on that. We have to be working on housing at all levels of affordability. We have to be looking at our health system. We have to be looking at what were the recommendations that came out of the committee. So there's a lot of complexity to this, as I think we all recognize, and I applaud the city for working with our partners for progress. We may not find the right solution, but something has to give, right? At least something's being tried, it's moving. And I think that's a step in the right direction. I do think there should be a more strategic approach and maybe more of a crowdsourced solution, strategic, long-term, because I think the homelessness task force was one piece of it. That's done. So what do we do now? Where do we go from here?
That's gonna
Implementation.
lead us into Deputy Mayor had some discussion in this on this topic, so we just want to go ahead and start
Thank you.
that.
Yeah, I think this is good segue and good timing, and thanks for, sorry I can't be there tonight, guys. I wish I was there in person to talk, but we've all been grappling with this issue for quite some time. The Brewer Park incidents are continuing to expand. Eric and I sat through, I think, 3 or so of the recent meetings with the county and various stakeholders. I mean, we packed the room in City Hall last week. And the frustrating moment in these discussions, we have all of the providers in the community, right? We have public health, we have the sheriff, we have the police chief, right? We have the right people in the room to make decisions, and it is incredibly difficult to get to an action step. Whether it be the costs, whether it be the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, whether it be jail space, staffing, etc., it's incredibly hard. So Eric and I, we took some time, debated through this a little bit, but we said, one item that we're missing right now is we do not have a clear direction for the city manager in order to pursue this. And what I'm suggesting tonight, a couple of things here. So we have in front of you a short-term draft response plan that is broken out into 3 objective areas. This is based on data from the homeless task force. It's based on conversations with nonprofits, law enforcement, and other organizations. These are things that I believe we can implement, we can accomplish, albeit there is a cost to some. There is effort to a lot of this that is going to require staff and time to do this. We need to figure that out, but we need to prioritize this. We need to, as a council, provide some direction on this as opposed to just solve the problem. But we need to break down some action steps. So this is very much a draft. This is very much throwing something at the wall and seeing what sticks. I don't necessarily need to read this out loud to everybody tonight. I would love for everybody to take a look at this and consider synthesizing this down into some steps that we can work with Mark on, and then start executing the plan. Enough talk, enough task forces. I think it's time that we start executing some of these things and seeing what works and what fully doesn't, and then changing course. as needed. Stepping through really quickly, the three core areas that I've heard from not only community members, business members, homeless folks themselves, as well as the providers and subject matter experts. But in my mind, the number one thing on our plan to boil down is ensuring public safety and hygiene in the community. The three major points under that are enhanced police and community presence, which simply just gets down to deterring property crimes requires patrol, which requires us to put an emphasis on patrol. And that's a direction, if that's what council would like to see, then again, that's a direction we should be cooperatively providing to the city manager so we can appropriately prioritize those resources. On top of that, I'd like us to consider looking into patrol partnerships, especially in the downtown area. Just because it is the city of Shelton, doesn't need that necessarily needs to be patrolled by the police department in the city of Shelton if we are suffering from staffing challenges. So looking into potentially like a downtown crime prevention task force, which has tentacles to community neighborhood watch type of organizations and those who are interested in volunteering and obviously when it is safe to do so, to work with our police department to better enhance the data that we're getting in the issues downtown. Outside that, we've talked about bathroom and restroom facilities. I'd love to establish designated public restroom sites around the city where we can have and I heard the comments from Community Lifeline about the challenges with sexual assaults in public restrooms and unmanaged, porta potties and that sort of thing. And terrible things can happen. I understand that, but also we just need to figure out a way to address this that works. Trash collection and cleanup initiatives. It costs money. It takes time. I understand that, but we can definitely look into potentially bolstering pickup and cleanup. And then again, I believe Councilmember Sherman has brought this up, but mobilizing volunteer groups but doing this in an official capacity, actually getting it on a calendar, advertising it publicly and coordinating it. What does that all take, right? The second core objective area is outreach and support services. One item that has been happening at Brewer Park since we've met is a coordinated approach to providing outreach to the people in the park. Why aren't people accepting the services? Why are there people who have houses hanging out in the park and getting drunk all day long, right? Like those are moments we need to understand and we need to do that outreach. And I'm all for formulating and constructing dedicated outreach teams that are set with some expectations about, where they contact and when and who, and obviously being comprised of the right professional skill sets and funding to make that happen. Paired with that, I've heard nothing but good feedback on the DCR program and our coordination on that. I appreciate the city manager sending out the statement of weekly activities from our DCR. At this point, that is showing a positive in the right direction, dealing with our mental health and other, mental or medical disorders related to this problem. And I would like to consider doubling down on that effort. And on that front, understanding that is a cost, we have had individual organizations also agree with us that this is going well and would be interested in coordinating on the cost and potentially ponying up some funds to assist with that. So rolling into the last, which is usually the most, in my opinion, the most contentious of the conversations, which is locating and establishing the temporary shelters and safe spaces around the city. Temporary being the key point. Mitigation sites are not permanent, and nor should they be, right? We did take some steps to ensure mitigation sites were no longer than, I believe, 7 to 9 months. But looking into any available sites, and they don't have to be public property. These are public-private partnership opportunities, in my opinion. But looking at those sites, using any of the tools that we have to identify locations for temporary shelters, definitely take into account access and to the various resources and utilities, and also making sure we minimize the community impact where we're sourcing those. an interesting sort of innovative concept that I heard from the exec director from Crossroads is just these like safe sleeping units that are fairly low cost, but basically there are a lot of people in the community that just need a safe place to sleep at night. They have a job, but they can't afford rent or whatever. They just need a safe place to store their stuff and sleep for the night. For all intents and purposes, they're a functioning member of society. I'm interested in understanding what opportunities we can provide, both whether it's potentially partnering on a purchase with the county or other organizations, or even working with faith-based organizations to open their doors to some of these folks. And then the outreach and shelter coordination, I would definitely like to see and better understand those who are not accepting services, really understanding why and what we can do to get them into services. Understanding a lot of this is making inroads in relationships and building trust. And I totally get that. And that takes time, it takes effort, it takes funding, and the drive to do it. I think, again, understanding those data points and having some of that being provided to the council on a more frequent basis, the status of our unhoused population, and really understanding this problem before we're trying to jump to some sort of action steps or any advocacy, because we did learn a lot of things just in the short amount focusing on Brewer Park. And I'm sure even today there's more lessons that we've learned and are going to build off of that moving on. But the biggest thing for me was I've yet to see anything really get put down on a piece of paper that we can convey back to our staff and ultimately prioritize this. And I'm very interested in where the council sits. If this is all garbage, no offense to me, again, my goal is to get something down and then start executing and laying it into the priorities of our budgeting and everything else that we just got kind of done talking about. So with that, I'll kick it back to the group.
James?
I always take issue with cleaning up after people. It's a hard one. I mean, if people want to utilize that area, we picked 1,000 pounds of garbage out of the park.
Yeah.
1,000 pounds of garbage. How many needles were in that? How much tinfoil with fentanyl on it was in that? I mean, we're putting our people at risk to pick up other people's garbage. I mean,
Oh,
maybe with an initiative of that, you got to clean the park up before you get to sleep in it. I mean, I don't have solutions for a lot of these other than I'm going to pound the enforcement drum of everything that we can enforce, because when we enforce what we can enforce, we start to set a precedent. And when we don't enforce things that we can enforce, once again, we set a precedent.
So Brewer Park started the way it started because there was one tent. And nobody did anything to that one tent. And if you ask some of the people who have come here from different communities why they're here, there's two reasons. Number one, it's safer to be homeless here. And number two, they don't bother you. We don't bother them. We don't nudge them. We haven't until recently. We just kind of left them alone if they didn't bother us. We didn't call the cops unless they were bothering us. There wasn't a big deal. So they grew because the neighbor saw it and somebody else said, oh, they can do it. I can do it. They can do it. I can do it. They can do it. Same thing with playground kids. All right. It's the exact same thing. So that is what has happened in Brewer Park. So we went from 1 to what you see. And last count, I think there was 14 or 15. And I know they've cleaned up. So that is what happens. We didn't set the precedent soon enough and it has grown.
What do you think of providing a big blue dumpster? Would they throw their garbage in that, or would they lay it on the ground right next to it?
It takes service. Yeah, it takes an effort.
Well, first, I just want to say, Joe, thank you for giving us something to start this conversation, because I think we've all been stuck in this. Where can we, how can we, and how do we take these concepts and put it into something concrete? And I think there's some obvious, steps forward here. I also think all of us need to keep in mind, and thank you, Joe, for bringing up the partnership aspect of this, being the fact that we are the only incorporated city on the county seat. We are uniquely positioned to provide those services, which in and of itself creates other realities. And so I think that there are some really strong pieces here. And I think, looking at what's working and the DCR team and pushing that forward. Okay, let's do that. Sandy cans, I know you've been talking about that, Mr. Mayor, for quite some time. We've tried it in the past, it didn't work. Let's try it differently, right? But at this point, I'm ready to try something and then let's reassess. If it's working, great. If it's not, take it off the list. Let's try something different. But I think the most important thing that we can do is take action.
Well, and like you were saying, Joe, too, somebody who actually is working and trying, there's stuff out there. I have 18 open beds right now. For people that want to be clean, that want to be sober, that want to move their life forward. I mean, I've had people in them that don't get charged. I've got people in them paying very minimal fees, but you know what? I have 18 beds available. I mean, with all of these people, why do I have 18 beds available? Like, it's, you know, once again, I'm gonna keep beating the same drum. It comes down to enforcing what we can enforce. That's the easiest start. We have things on the books that we're able to enforce that we don't. And I mean, that's an instant step that literally we could take tonight. Like, it doesn't take $1 million. It doesn't take a group of people to come downtown with gloves and pickup sticks. It takes just jumping out there and I'm done.
Well, and another thing is, and I'm totally in agreement with you, but another thing is, we made the bottom really comfortable here. We've given them all the luxuries basically, and we leave them alone to do what they want. So why would they rise to the top when the bottom is comfortable?
Who made it comfortable? Who's the we in that statement? Can you
Making
define?
that, so let me explain. So when they set up the tents in the park and they left their trash everywhere, we kind of let it go for a while. So we didn't have somebody coming in and saying, hey, you gotta go, you gotta go, you gotta clean up your mess. We didn't make it uncomfortable. Plus, we gave them food. We give them, if they want a sleeping bag, there's a place that'll give them a sleeping bag. If they need clothes, there's organizations that'll give them clothes. They'll give them all these things, but they don't ask for anything in return. They don't say, hey, can you pick up that trash before you hand you the sleeping bag? Can you know what I mean? We've made the bottom a nice, soft, cushy place to be without any expectations. And so just like a child, when you tell them to clean their room and they pick up one thing and then they play for the rest of the night, it's comfortable. Why would they try harder?
Sorry.
Like I said, this can we get a motion to extend?
Well, being at the bottom is not a cushy place to be, so I just disagree.
Let's get a motion to extend the meeting for. Can we get a motion to
Then the meeting.
30 minutes.
30
30
minutes?
I move to extend the meeting for 30 minutes.
I second it.
Motion to second, extend this meeting for 30 minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
And I totally agree with Sharon.
Who was on this?
So what I was gonna say off of that is if we made it, well, we don't have to arrest everybody. We don't have to do that. But constantly having the, hey, what are you doing here? By a police presence or somebody in authority. What are you doing here? What is your purpose here? Why are you here? If there's that constant nudge, it's just like the kids on the playground, they go to the back corner because the recess teacher isn't there. But when the recess teacher sees them all the time, is always there, they move, they disperse, they go somewhere else. Okay, so that's just a really simple, broke down version of how you can make it a little more uncomfortable. You do park at the places that they hang out. The cop car just sits there, and that's maybe where they do their paperwork. You let it be seen that we're not ignoring you. We know that you're there, because if they think they're not being seen, it's too comfortable for them just to hang out. Okay, I'm done there.
I think it shows a lack of. This discussion is showing a lack of our understanding of how diverse the homeless population is and why they're here.
Mhm.
I'm gonna stop there.
I think Deputy Mayor. I think we kind of wanted to see if we can give some of these recommendations to the city manager to implement, correct?
There's not necessarily tonight, no action or anything tonight. What I more or less wanted to do was plant this in the minds and just again remind the council that we have yet to actually provide the city manager with council direction on how to respond to this issue. And I think it's long overdue. And whether we do it through this format or some other, I don't really care. But it should be a unanimous approach. I'm not going to lie. And we're not unanimous on the approach today. The second request I had is I would like there to be at least 2 council members assigned to working with Mark on this, if that's possible. Right now, again, we don't have anybody. Eric and I have attended a few meetings, but there should be probably a council member or two that is interested in taking this on and working this through with the city manager to be able to provide the appropriate input along the way. That's just a suggestion. Again, if it's garbage, throw it out. You're not going to offend me on that, but there should probably be a direct conduit between the council and city manager on this topic as well. So we're not sending people in 7 different directions and in doing that, but just some thoughts to the group.
I would volunteer for that.
I'll volunteer.
All right. Appreciate it.
Yeah, that too.
Can you have 3?
Wish I had the ability to show up to it.
We certainly, as long as it's not a quorum meeting outside, I have a feeling that what I'm hearing today, it's gonna end up back at a council meeting. Because the diverging, opinions and responses and whatever action might take place, so. I think that everybody's gonna have a role in this, right? And certainly deserves a role in this at the council level. But I'm comfortable with what the council's comfortable with at this point.
I'm willing to do all of it, but we have to do all of it. We can't just pick one.
Well, you gotta start out.
No, I mean, I'm fine. Let's do it your way, but let's do all of it. And like I said, look, this is a bigger problem than just us. This is refugees. These are economic refugees of our capitalist system.
You're
So
shackling us with that stance to say we have to.
how am I
do all-
shackling?
Because that's just like
a
saying we need to do
financial
every single project that we have on the books now, or we're not gonna do anything. It doesn't work that way. It'd be nice if just literally we could give everybody a free home and give them.
Countries have
inpatient
done it.
drug cleaning. What's that?
It's not in a place to do
But
that.
that's just not.
Financially,
that's not
you're
even-
not in
It's
a
not even the American way. We're a place where you come and get to build yourself up from nothing. You don't come and get given everything. You have the ability to do anything you want in this country.
The.
Until you're homeless and you don't have
You
an
still-
address.
You still have the ability to do that. I've not had an address before and gotten jobs. I mean, there's so many things you can do. It's not an excuse that just because.
Or
you're
until
homeless,
you're
you can't-
underinsured and you can't get back to where you were and start working
Hey,
again.
I understand. I've rebuilt my life 3 times from nothing. The
I'm just saying,
ability's
so I think
there.
we can
If
talk
you
about
see
the
the people that are there,
difference.
there's some tragedy that they're underinsured, they can't get back to where they were, they're gonna need more services, they're more like exceptional foresters than other folks.
Once again, we're talking different sects of the community too. The enforcement level isn't on the guy who's trying to go to work that just doesn't have a place to
Are you
stay.
sure?
So the
Is that the guy that's
enforcement,
shooting up in the park?
the
Probably
enforcement,
not.
I'm talking about
Have
Sharon,
you talked to people at the?
about tents.
You
A
know.
good example is over by Hobby Lobby. They came in and swept that, cleaned it out.
One side.
It is now rebuilt.
Okay, well, hold on. They are putting those people in hotels, so.
Well, there's another camp that just has moved
Well,
down.
I know, but they are putting people in hotels.
So again,
Let's stay.
Yes.
yeah, we're kind of talking about root causes here. and I think
Yeah.
that-
Yeah.
That the root cause needs to be addressed in certain circumstances, right? I mean, if we can address the root cause, we can affect this, we can affect these people, we can affect our community. At the end of the day, though, we have to somewhat address the impacts, right? And that can be a tandem process, right? If we can affect root cause at the same time as we're, addressing the impacts, we can certainly do that. We just.
Would it
I just
make,
want to make sure that we know that they are putting them in hotels and we don't have a hotel. We don't own a
Right.
hotel. We don't have money
The
to buy a
Quinta and
hotel.
Lacey was purchased, yeah, DSHS, yeah.
Yeah.
would it maybe make
So-
sense, and again, this is a question to the group, but would it maybe make sense to take these 3 kind of categories that we've got outlined here and have, a couple people work on the public safety and hygiene, and a couple people work on outreach and support, and a couple people work on shelters, work with the subject matter experts, come back, and then we do a council meeting, full council meeting, kind of report back out and try to find where there's some common ground, because I think there's some things that overlap. But until the entire council can give Mark direction, we're not going to see movement. And there are issues with, public safety and hygiene that are separate from the support services side versus looking at locations and shelter space. So maybe we need to kind of break it down that way.
And for the record, Mark started his little manager report that he has started addressing these issues. We have been going down to the park with police, fire, staff. DCRs, Crossroads, 3 times now. So some process has started. It's not like we have done nothing. So we need to build on that. Let's build on that. But does anybody have any other suggestions?
Well,
Besides-
if we get commitments towards, you know, from council towards working on some common goals, we can develop this, you know, this draft plan as we work through it, right? There's gonna be I think there's gonna be a more productive time to work through this. Councilman Peterson's you know, suggestion of splitting this up is fine with me. I can address it however the council likes. I'm at your disposal. If that means splitting it up or splitting it up into 2 groups, I'm certainly able and willing to do that. We can do it at that point, kind of as a lead, and then, you know, take it from there more succinctly, I guess, with one group. I guess I'm at your disposal. I'm willing to do whatever appeases the council at this point, but I appreciate it. I really do, because it's a difficult situation for staff. It's a difficult situation for our parks employees, our public works employees, our police officers. Our police officers are in between a rock and a hard place. As you know, they have personal liability in situations they deal with out on the streets, and it puts them in a bad position to ask them to do things that may lead to these some ramifications personally, right? Because they're dealing with these unknown situations. I have to caution about a civil rights lawsuit. I know maybe
I understand.
speaking from the cuff, but I have to caution
I'm
that
speaking from
we
the
are not
cuff,
protected
Tom.
by insurance there.
I understand, but I'm also speaking from a place where not taking action because you're afraid you're gonna get sued is a bad place to be as well. I mean, I'm not stating that we should go out there and violate people's rights, but we've got some floating rights right now, some stuff, and so I understand the challenges of it. It's why it's been such a long, hard topic that we keep coming back to with literally 0 solutions.
Right.
I mean, we've got 2 sides, and then there's a very narrow middle. Arrest everybody, give everybody a free house, something in the middle, like, and we've got 2 sides that just are probably not gonna meet in the middle. But what's that middle even look like?
We need implementable plans here.
Yeah.
Because
You gotta figure
that's
that
why
out.
That's why I jump on to enforce what's enforceable. If we simply do that, we're starting somewhere, and we're starting with something that we have some knowns about. Because we can enforce no trespassing, we can enforce drug use. Now, are our prosecutors gonna prosecute drug use and minuscule crimes? I don't know.
Littering still illegal.
But yeah, I mean, enforcing what we can enforce is a great start. And like I said, it doesn't take much more.
I think some education too, because Chief Beeson's really good at explaining certain nuances here, because a pizza box can be a possession. Right,
Oh, yeah.
right? To some of the, I was down there last Thursday, some of the individuals down there, everything around them was a possession, right? They didn't want to give up. And it took some communication, it took some, I wouldn't say coercing, but it's convincing that maybe they didn't need some of this stuff that literally was refuse, literally trash. But to somebody living in that situation, they see that as possessions, and there might be a value to that at some point. So what we walk by and we see laying on the ground that might be trash, they might see as a possession, and we have to go through a process to help them determine that if that's the case and clean up the area. I spending a couple hours down there on Thursday with some of the individuals that were working with them in the park, was really eye-opening, and I really appreciate the work they do. There's 2 of them back here in the back of the room, right? It really was eye-opening. It's sad that these folks don't have more for their lives. There's an individual down there going through a health crisis, sleeping on the ground in the fetal position. EMS came and checked on them, had good enough vitals, they couldn't admit them, but that individual just wanted to stay there. Yeah, it's a tough situation, but we need to find some implementable programs and goals that we can provide.
And that's not uncommon. And there are people like Community Lifeline who are literally in there waiting to die because they can't get medical
Yeah.
services.
Yeah, so.
Well, but see, the example that you just gave was they couldn't get it, they refused it.
Yeah.
So.
It's not everybody that does. There are a ton of
Certainly not.
people that
Yeah,
want
I
it.
didn't state that.
Yeah.
I didn't state that it was everyone. I utilized an example that was given.
Yeah.
And hospitals will take you.
But we have to consider, you know,
And then send you back and then discharge you to your last known address.
we have.
then
to
you're stuck
consider-
back
We have
to
to
where you
consider
were.
all of them, right? And we have to consider every scenario and every individual in this case, because it's different in every case, right?
That's what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say, and it's not an easy, let's just count folks. It's not gonna happen.
Understood. So,
I just want to say that I try to find every article that I can find on Mark v. Boise. Spokane tried to circumvent Mark v. Boise and lost in court. Idaho obviously tried to circumvent it, lost in court. San Diego tried to circumvent it and lost in court. Grant Pass tried to circumvent it and lost in court. Martin v. Boise is very clear. If there is no bed, then they can sleep on public right of way. Can we clear the park out? Absolutely. Do you want them all on railroad? This council can decide to clear Brewer Park out today and they'll all be on railroad in front of the restaurants, the alcoves, the parking lots at the square where they.
But
it
see,
is.
once again, I refuse to live in the fear of that. If I just don't give people what they want,
No,
they're
no,
gonna
no.
do something
I'm
else.
not saying that. I'm just saying that
Okay.
if we want them out of Brewer Park, then that's where they're gonna end up. It's gonna be on the railroad. Is that the worst place at this moment in time?
But what
No.
I'm
Is it
stating,
the best place?
but
No,
what I'm
well,
stating is that they don't, if they want to go on the railroad and we have a bed and they refuse a bed,
No.
we enforce that.
And we did
So
that.
that's what I'm stating. And the more we do that, of course,
Yeah.
if we don't have the bed for them, but then, then our hands are tied. You can sleep apparently in any right of way you wish. But when we do have the bed and they choose to not take that bed, we start to take enforcement. Yeah.
And correct, and we've taken enforcement, I believe, so.
Understood?
And for me, I think public safety, period, is the first step. We want.
Yeah.
All of the individuals in our city, whatever state they're in, to feel safe. And I think that maybe that's what we tackle first, is this first section of public safety concerns. And we just start there.
I also want to remind us, if we clear someone out, where are they gonna go? They're gonna go somewhere else. So maybe they're gonna end up in Aberdeen. So that's Aberdeen's problem. And then we got clean for 2 weeks. I mean, this is just a rotating,
I
And this-
totally, they
this-
get
and
the
this
services
happened-
that they need.
and this happened at Olympia too, right? If Hobby Lobby got cleared out, are some of those folks over here at Brewer Park now? I don't know.
No,
Just
they-
saying, we're just
they're rebuilding
rotating
that
folks.
by Hobby Lobby.
And then until we start doing more creative things about housing, this is just gonna keep popping up year after year after year.
We're looking at the big, huge financial issues we have with the city. With our water and sewer
And our general fund.
and our general fund. Who thinks it's okay to, let's build a motel or a hotel? Who's gonna pay for it? That's the thing. Who's gonna pay for this shelter?
yeah, I don't think anybody's looking at that coming out of the general fund. There's resources available. Our partners in the community, our nonprofits have the ability to seek those resources, and they've committed to helping seek those resources. So we're continuing to have those conversations,
Right.
active conversations with those organizations to help find the ability to provide some of those resources.
So we can look at it a different way. We can look at it backwards. Deidre gave us a book, 40 Ways to Kill Your Community, or was it?
And there's
Okay.
10 ways.
10 ways, yeah. Felt like a lot more. I read the whole thing. Anyways, but let's look at it backwards. What happens if we don't do something? What happens if we don't do something? The problem escalates, it grows exponentially. Do people want to buy here anymore? Probably not. Do businesses want to open up down here? Probably not. What happens to our tax revenue right now? At that point, it's gone. Then we can't do anything if we do nothing. We have a bigger problem if we ignore the problem.
It's the same conversation we've been having around enforcement. Code enforcement, period.
Absolutely.
It's about setting the expectations within our community and connecting people to the resources where we can.
Exactly. So.
We need to get a data set, right? We need data sets here. We need to know who we're dealing with, what we're dealing with, and we have to know how to address it, right? If that helps, it helps us inform decisions. You just saw it with utility rates. It's no different. It isn't much different. We need to know what we're dealing with. We need to know the numbers. We need to know who we're addressing. We need to know how much it costs. We need to know the manpower it takes. We have, 2 police officers on day shift. I talked to one of them down at Community Lifeline for a half hour last Friday and ran out the door to a call. And didn't see him again the rest of the day because they were running around on calls all day. I think you got the data about 1,200 calls in July for our PD. It's significant,
That's a
right?
lot for a
So,
town of this
so we need to plan, right? And we need to plan proactively. We need to utilize the resources we have available to us, or we can just seek other resources. And that's why, at least a representation of the council is important to work through this.
I think a representation of the council to work on these is a really good thing, because people are coming up to us and say, what are you gonna do?
Constantly.
Constantly. I mean, I go for a cup of coffee or for lunch or something. They're there. What are you gonna do? Well, do you have well, no, I said, we don't have a suggestion at this point either.
Okay.
You know, we have to get be able to say to our citizens of
That we
Shelton
try.
that we have a plan. This is what.
So so I guess there's 2 options right now. I heard at least three individuals that are interested, and then I heard maybe splitting it up between multiple council members per item. Is there a preferred?
Where
That's what
I'm at with this is whoever is gonna do this needs to make sure they can invest the time and be there for this stuff. I cannot personally. So I'm happy to put as much effort as I possibly can, but I guess I'm just saying whatever we choose, whichever direction, it's just there needs to be some level of commitment on it. And because again, to the same points, I believe Sharon just
Mark, I
brought.
look forward to working with
Yes.
Councilmember Sherman, Councilmember McDowell, and if I can work together with them on this problem and we're unanimous, that would be like what the city needs, because we are probably on the opposite sides of it. And if we can come to an agreement on how the city should move forward, I think that would be an excellent opportunity for the city to say, look, we worked it out and this is what's best for the city.
Right.
And I'm looking forward to it. And I really want to talk to Councilmember Sherman McDowell. We actually have probably more in common than differences for real.
Is that a good starting point for council?
Does it get you what you need, Mark? More than anything, I
I
guess.
think so. I've got 3 points of contact here. I can establish a meeting. We can start working towards developing this further, come to the full council with action items. And suggestions on how to move forward, and we'll dedicate as much time as we can to this over the next week or 2. In the meantime, we'll continue the activity that we've been performing at Brewer Park. We'll address the cleanliness issue, continue providing opportunities for those to seek services. We will enforce upon those that most need to be enforced upon. Those that are kind of, like I said, that residual activity, those folks that don't need to be there. They've got someplace else to be. They don't need to hang there. They don't need to prey on people that are vulnerable. And if we can address those issues, that solves probably our most underlying issue downtown, right? Because that tends to grow, tends to fester and grow. So
And the Blake decision fixes August 15th, and that's kind of been a needle in.
yeah, it's not the magic wand, right? So yes,
More enforcement.
it's more enforceable. You can cite, you can take people to jail based on drug possession, drug use. The drugs or paraphernalia still needs to be tested in a lab, right? Part of that bill was funding for the state patrol crime lab to test drugs or paraphernalia. I believe it was. I'm trying to think, 45 days sound right? Is that right? They were committed to do that within 45 days. We'll see if that is reality. But in the meantime, those individuals are held maybe, if it's a Friday, maybe through the weekend or maybe 24 hours at the same time.
I heard that that's being appealed, that they're fighting on that, no?
I think they're tying this up. I think it's
Okay.
going through.
No, we. 1 minute.
I hadn't heard.
Yeah, that's what I heard the
Yeah,
other.
so
Hopefully we can work with the county with their new machine that they're buying and maybe get a little faster.
that's not, that just, yeah, I don't know if that's admissible. I think it has to be through the crime lab, but I know what you're referring to. It's basically kind of a sniffer that tells you what kind of. Maybe that's not the right term. But yes, it'll determine what that substance is, but it still has to go to the crime lab. So the individuals could go out on the street within a relatively short amount of time, but yes. Do they know they're being watched? They know they're being inserted in the system. Do they want to keep going through that? Probably not.
All
All
right.
right.
I appreciate everybody's conversation and indulging me on this. So appreciate everybody. So thank you.
I appreciate your efforts on this, Joe.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Any other new items for discussion? I'm gonna extend the meeting for another hour. All right.
No.
Oh.
And this meeting is